you for joining us. I'm Peter Faulks, Agility Lead at Scottish Water. I'm joined here by Cameron Leask, our Enterprise Agile Coach from Calba. So I'd like to welcome you all here as customers of Scottish Water. Every single one of you I know will have used our services today, both our water services and our wastewater. I certainly hope you have used them both. Your health is very much dependent upon these two services. But we also have an impact on the environment as well, the environmental health of our country, especially our waterways. And we have an impact on the financial health of Scotland because we are a public company and we've got to use the funding that we have very wisely so we get the most from it for the people of Scotland. Now, I have a belief that business agility could really help us with what we do as a business. And so I'm going to share with you today what I've been working on for the last few years. So my role is to develop business agility within Scottish Water as part of our transformation. And I'm going to talk through what our strategic ambitions are, the context in which we applied it, and then how we did the basic design to test out this principle. Could agility help? And it's quite an interesting example, I think, quite different from what you would normally hear from this platform. Then I'm going to pass over to Cameron, who's going to tell you what really happened when we really got started with this, what we actually did, and then we'll round off with the outcomes and the learnings from that. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time for questions. And I ask that we keep those questions to the agile aspects, albeit I'm happy to chat about Scottish Water afterwards. So this is our overall vision in the centre here, and round the outside are our three strategic ambitions: beyond net zero, service excellence, and great value in financial sustainability. And I believe that business agility can really help with all three of these things. But in particular, my focus has been around that great value in financial sustainability. But it does help all three of them. And what we wanted to do was have what we called a front runner, an area of the business, maybe 50 to 150 people, something that was really important to the business that we could go and work in and say, look, this works. Look how much value it has delivered. Now, back in 2022, our agile practice in Scottish Water looked quite like this. It was like a kind of turbulent stream with lots of different individual things going on and coming in from different directions, and we couldn't quite see where it went. And we can see it kind of going through the trees there. There's lots going on, individuals all doing their own thing, some really, really great stuff, and some maybe not quite so mature. And I'm hoping that beyond the trees there in the distance is business agility. I'm hoping it's nice and smooth flowing river, nice and broad. I don't know. I don't know what the path is to get from here through to there. And this experiment we ran was part of us doing that. Now, I have this belief that is probably quite unpopular because I don't hear anybody else saying this. I hear the opposite. But I think agility can be used everywhere, certainly across Scottish Water. But I've got two caveats to that, what I'm saying. Firstly, by that, I mean the core principles of Agile. Chris Downey at Calba helped us write these 7 Agile foundations for Scottish Water. They're all the kind of things you recognise. But if you get to the very core of what Agile is, I'm not talking about Scrum or Kanban or anything like that, but if you get to the very core, these things can apply in a far wider context. And I can't think of a team in Scottish Water where these don't apply. But my second caveat is it may not be worth the effort. If I think about our laboratories in Scottish Water where we do all the water analysis, these principles apply, but it isn't going to make a huge, big difference to their performance. There's probably a lot more from Lean that could help them. So we've got to apply it in the right way. But nevertheless, I'm always looking for opportunities in the business where we can apply Agile. And when you think about Scottish Water, it's about the most stable business you can think of. You can't avoid our service. We are quite slow in changing. We have a monopoly, you could say. And I chose about the most waterfall process you could possibly think of which is design and construction. And that is where I thought we would apply agility. Although I am a civil engineer myself, so of course I would think that. So I'm going to introduce the program of work that we focused ourselves on. And it's to do with what we call combined storm overflows on our sewer system. And I'll explain what those are in a wee minute. But we basically go through 3 stages. It is a bit more complicated than this, but we've simplified it for the sake of this presentation. We go through a stage where we look at various options and we decide what it is we're going to build. And then we do more and more detailed design, and then we go and build it. It's quite simple as that. It takes 4 to 6 years for combined storm overflows to do that for every single one of them. They can be quite complex jobs, surprisingly. Now, we didn't just have to do one of these. We had agreed with our regulator, the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. We agreed together that we'd deliver 108 of these by December 2027. And this was us talking back in 2022 that we were going to be doing this. And how on earth would we deliver 108 different needs? And you can imagine them all cascading down like this, all at once, all these things, and you can't leave the construction to the end. You've got to try and smooth this as much as possible, so you're designing and delivering these things, constructing them smoothly through these 5 years. And as I say, they were typically taking 4 to 6 years each. I should say that each one of these jobs, they're at least £2 million each, if no more. These are big construction, design and construction activities. So this was what we called a front runner, an agility front runner. It had a really ambitious goal. Not only that, but storm overflows have been in the media a lot since 2022, especially in England and Wales, but Scotland has its pressure too. There's a lot of public opinion about sewer overflows. This really ambitious goal, but I did have 2 willing general managers. I'd done work with them before with Agile, and they were willing to work with me again, which was great. We had partners, we worked with lots of other companies to deliver this work, and they were willing to work with us on a new approach. And I could see loads of Agile opportunity within this. So I'm going to put my engineer's hat on, and I'm going to explain to you about combined storm overflows. The overall program is called Improving Urban Waters, which gives you a real clear indication of the outcome of this work. But a storm overflow, basically, our sewers have combined flow from rainwater and from the foul flow from our properties. That's just the way they were designed back in the Victorian era. And it gives us a big problem because the rainwater fills up the pipes, and it's got to have a relief point somewhere. And we don't want it to come out of manholes and cause flooding and go into properties. So we have to have a controlled way of managing this. Now, I should say any system designed in the last 20 years, these flows are separate. But we've got this legacy of well over 100 years worth, 30,000 miles of network, which is combined. Storm overflows are basically, that picture on the left is a half-constructed one. The bit you can't see on the right-hand side is where the sewer flows. When the flows back up, when there's heavy rainfall, it goes through a mechanical screen, which has a cleaning mechanism on it, and it spills over that wall, and it goes into our waterways. And we agree with SEPA what the right parameters of this are. With ongoing developments and more and more paved surfaces, with climate change, obviously these standards are getting challenged all the time. So we have to invest in improving these overflows that we have on the network. So that's what a storm overflow is. So this is actually a system problem, and I know at this conference we love to talk about system problems. Firstly, it's a physical system. It's a network of pipes, and there's really complex hydraulics involved in understanding that physical system and where's the right point to solve it. So there's a huge amount of computing hydraulic design done. It takes days to run to try and simulate the rainfall and how to solve the problem. But it is, of course, a system problem in the fact that it involves people and companies and contracts and processes and cultures and all these kind of things. So it's it's a people system as well, and that is really challenging. The industry is very transactional. It's very fragmented. That's just the way that design and construction works. We have a relationship with our environment regulator. We've got many regulators, but we've shown here SEPA. We have people who design things. So we've got companies we work with who do the engineering design. We've got a partner who goes out and does surveys for us. That's topographical surveys on site. And then we've got construction partners who do detailed design and build it. And the industry is just, very contractual. All the work tends to flow back up through Scottish Water. It's very waterfall. You can't start pouring concrete at the end of a sprint. We don't even use Scrum at all in this scenario. And it's multiple skill. I reckon there's probably about 30, if not more, different professional skills involved in these projects over the time. 5 different partners, 8 different companies actually involved in this. And everybody's really busy all the time. So you end up with huge amount of work in progress. They can have 100 jobs on at once because everybody's doing their little bit and passing over to them and taking this bit on. And you can understand the challenge that would bring. But hopefully you can see this great opportunity for Agile in this kind of environment. And so when we were thinking about this problem, how do we deliver this work within this time frame? How do we get that level of improvement? We came up with a basic design. We knew we needed an overall unit owner. It's at this point I started involving Calba, so we had Richard Gunson from Calba who came and helped me try and figure out how do we shape up these teams. We work with the general managers and with our partners and said, well, we'll have an overall unit owner, somebody who owns this from the business. We're going to set up 2 teams. They are not just cross-functional teams, they are cross-partnership teams. So these are made up of people from different companies. In fact, one of the product owners was not from Scottish Water, it was from one of our partners. And it was like the key skills we reckon we needed. And in a way, we put names on all these roles, but we knew that there was also a huge amount of people in our delivery partner, our design consultants who would have to work with this. We knew there were roles that had to go across these teams. We knew that there was design and construction teams that needed to get involved later down. We knew we were a survey partner. And we also knew that there was all these teams in Scottish Water and many, many more that needed to be involved. And we didn't know how that was going to work. But we had this basic idea that we had these 2 core teams. And so as we do in Agile, we just started. We didn't have it all figured out, but we used the engagement with those teams to say, right, let's start with this and see how it goes. And so in December 22, we had a kickoff workshop. We all got together and said, right, let's go and do this. And then we went away for Christmas break. And then we came back and then we had to really figure it out. At that time as well, we had Ian Tully, Ian's in the room, who came and helped us as well and helped deal with that manic time when we're all trying to figure this out. And it did take a wee while to settle. And about 3 or 4 months in, the teams were starting to figure out how to work together. And all these unanswered questions that we had here were starting to be understood. And the unit owner was eventually released from her previous job. And she came in. She made a tremendous difference, having the right leadership. She would have been here if she wasn't on holiday. But Lindsay did a fantastic job at leading this team in the right way. And also Cameron Leask came in at that time to help figure out how could we, improve these teams and get them working in the right way. And he worked with them for over a year. And so I'm going to pass over to Cameron to explain about what happened when we really got going. Cameron.
Thanks, Peter. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through? Cool. Hello. My name's Cameron Leask. I'm an enterprise agility coach. I've been working with Peter at Scottish Water with Calba for 18 months or so. As Peter has said, we're entering quite a complex system here. So we've got Scottish Water, represented by the blue box. You'll start to see some of these colourful boxes emerging as I go forward. Multiple partners, and what was essentially, for any given one of these projects, really quite a siloed way of working. There's reasons for that, about procurement and history and just how we do things around here and all that kind of stuff. And as Peter mentioned, the issue is when you've got 108 of them, then all of a sudden these silos are going to become really significant to us. It's going to become quite a excuse me, a challenge. Having agreed with SEPA about where these 108 geographically dispersed, completely unique projects are, and what all the issues associated with them might be, how are we going to deliver this within the timescale of end of December 2027? So before we begin, I would like to introduce you to the complex adaptive system that is the process that takes us towards the construction of these things. So complex adaptive is a reference to the fact that you can't necessarily always predict what the outcome will be, because the system itself is constantly changing underneath you. And the classic example of that, of course, is systems that involve humans, because we might have different reactions to different types of things at different points in time. But essentially, the system, the value stream, if you like, is taking us from the position of uncertainty. We know there's a problem, but we don't necessarily know why, through to the point of absolute predictability of outcome. We no longer have the problem. The challenge is solved. Peter was talking about numbers. We're talking broadly 150 to 200 people involved in the delivery of all of this stuff, with very limited experience of agility. Down at the extreme right-hand end of the value stream, you've got the construction stage, where people are putting literally diggers, spades in the ground. In order to get to construction, we need to design what it is we're going to build. And in order to get to design, we need to actually make some decisions about what is it we're going to build, and in what manner will we build it, and to what sort of standards must it comply. We've spoken about those silos, and broadly speaking, the silos are those three different stages, broadly. And there were some really particularly hard transactional handoffs between these stages. We don't talk to them. We tell Scottish Water, and then Scottish Water tell them. And if there's a problem, then we go back. And there was a lot of that going on just in the traditional way of working. So as 108 of these things arrive, and there's not necessarily an awful lot of control on work in process, they arrive. Some work is done in that deciding stage. The work moves forward through the hard handoff into the world of design. It might well be that actually the design folks have some questions about what the work needs to be, so the work gets blocked at the design stage and it has to come back into the world of decision making for clarification, review, whatever that might happen to be. The work can then be resolved, move forward, but in the meantime, more work in process has arrived or been started. And so we end up in this kind of really awkward, we end up in this really kind of awkward stage of a lack of predictability, fundamentally driven by high WIP, but not entirely by high WIP. It's also about the ways of working and how the work flows between all the different organizations. Okay, but it's not just about ways of working. There are real world considerations as well. So number one, sometimes you have to wait for the right kind of rain. We might not know actually what are the conditions that create the challenge in the first place. Maybe we have to put some telemetry down into the systems and wait for the right kind of rain, the heavy enough rainfall that allows us to say with certainty what is it that causes the particular problem. We might also have ecological issues. So Peter referenced the fact that this infrastructure is often quite old. It might well be that we now have mature trees nearby. There might be nesting bats. We have some dependencies there. It might be transmigratory voles. Could be an issue, all sorts of other things, right? The real world gets in the way. It might be that where the infrastructure is placed now happens to be in the middle of somebody else's land, perhaps a supermarket car park or a golf club or something like that. And there's a whole lot of negotiation steps need to be done there. And my own personal favorite is Taylor Swift comes to town. And all of a sudden, a piece of work that was due to happen gets pushed out because you can't go onto the road just at Murrayfield just before Taylor does her concert, just in case it maybe the work goes on. And that takes you, well, then there's the festival, and then there's other work to be done. Perhaps Scottish Power or Scottish Gas Networks also need access to the same bit of road to dig it all up. So there's all that kind of stuff. And then it's Christmas, and right, so before you know where you are, Taylor Swift comes to town, and that's a 9 to 12 month delay straight away before we've even really thought about how we might choose to optimize it. So, the real world gets in the way as well. This is not purely a way of working challenge. Okay, bye-bye, Taylor. So back to this diagram. So I'm trying to give you an understanding of the complexities in this system, right? They're not trivial. And so the thrust of this, I'm going to make a Cynefin reference here. The thrust of this is to take the complexity out of the system as early as possible. So in the deciding phase, there's huge amounts of uncertainty and complexity about where are the nesting bats, what are the options that we might choose to consider building, where might we put the new CSO, how would we tie it in with the existing networks, all the rest of it. What are the levels? Do we actually understand what it is? Where would we take the new outfall? Loads of complexity. Probe, sense, respond. As distinct from, as the work comes down through the value stream, we're really now, we want the work to be complicated rather than complex. The people doing the design, we want them to be able to work within their governing constraints of, engineering load and, safety requirements and all that kind of stuff without having to worry too much about all the complexities of when's Taylor doing her concert and what about the nesting bats, right? We want to have removed all of that stuff before the designers get to do the design work. By the time we get to building, we kind of want the work to be clear. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that the work on a construction site is clear and simple and straightforward. It's absolutely not. But we absolutely do want to get to the point where we've taken as much of the complexity out so that the work that's done on the construction site can be predictable. Because if it's not predictable, then that becomes expensive for us as an organization. It becomes expensive for the environment in terms of emissions and all the rest of it. It becomes expensive for the members of the general public, traffic delays and all the rest of it, right? So we want the work to be as clear as it can be by the time it reaches the construction site. So 5 partners, but more than 5 organizations, because some of those partner organizations are actually joint ventures. So I go back to this complex adaptive system, right? I'm trying to just help you understand the dimensions of complexity in this environment. Right, where do we go next? So what was our hypothesis? Our hypothesis for this work was, number one, we could see the silos. So if we improve communication and address the silos, and number two, if we could somehow amp up the flow efficiency, get the work moving, then a number of positive outcomes will accrue. So we will know we are succeeding if we've got predictable cycle times, shorter cycle times, if we get lower WIP somehow, if we get higher throughput at key points in that value stream, if we are able to see that teams are sustaining new ways of working, improved collaboration behaviors, improved continuous improvement behaviors, that would all be positive indicators that we're going in the right direction, right? That's what we were striving for. Oh, and by the way, we've got 108 things to deliver as well. So classic perform while you transform while you perform type stuff. So let's talk about how we addressed that. So first of all, I don't think we've actually mentioned this. One of the big things we did was we changed the contractual arrangements to try to remove some of the things that had driven the silo behaviors, and instead create an environment where all the organizations were brought together. So by doing that, it allowed us to play around with the team structures, which Peter referenced earlier. I'm going to show you just a slight enhancement on the diagram that Peter showed you. So we were able to take the deciding teams and think about them on their own. We had a surveying partner that was supporting all of that decision making. And what we did was we brought some of the design and build skill sets into the decision-making teams. So that's a different way of saying we shifted left a whole bunch of people. But we also brought with them, in shifting the people left, we also brought with them their knowledge and awareness and experience and tool sets and understanding of further downstream processes. We brought them left in the value stream. And we did the same thing with product ownership, which is maybe a slightly more kind of traditional understanding in terms of agility. We embedded product ownership inside those decision-making teams. But we also put building experience in with the design teams, and we also brought product ownership into the design teams as well, right? So at risk of getting into too much detail, but we did a whole load of shift left of skill set and people and tools and knowledge and understanding. Subsequently, the teams actually decided that they would like to have the concept of a functional owner, so a kind of a specialist at each of these stages of the work. And I'm going to be quite honest with you, as the coach, I was like, that's going to drive the silos back in. I was quite worried that that was going to happen. But actually, what that turned out to be was a really useful way to do knowledge sharing across multiple teams with similar skill sets and focuses. It worked out really well. So that was good, because the teams came up with that themselves. Anyway, just to simplify the diagram a little bit, I'll take that away for just now. So this is a diagram of something that's a bit more like the real world. This is the diagram we were working with as we worked with these teams. Some of you might recognize this as a team topologies style notation. And you can see quite clearly we've got the yellow stream-aligned, these are the teams that are doing the work, versus lots and lots of purple enabling teams, versus lots and lots of blue platform services underneath, right? And every single time there's a touch point between some of these boxes, that's a dependency between teams. And so the trick became to try to make sure that we were working on understanding and managing the dependencies and engineering them out of the process if we possibly could. Okay. Oh yeah, and another point about complexity. These things have a 4 to 6 year life cycle, so it's not uncommon for work to arrive into the middle of year 3, and nobody can actually remember what the decisions were at the start, because that was my predecessor's predecessor who made that decision, and I actually don't know where they stored the files on SharePoint, but we'll find them. It'll be okay. Right. So that's just another little dimension of complexity there. So the second thing that we did in all of this was that we applied Kanban, and I'm going to go with the pro Kanban definition of Kanban in terms of it's a strategy for improving the flow of value through a workflow. So we first of all mapped out the portfolio. So this is the Kanban board that spans a 4 to 6 year cycle time of where is the work in the workflow right now. So that's the whole portfolio of 108 things, one way or another, at different stages in the work. So having visualized that big high-level portfolio, we then went down to team level. So that just for reference, that was the kind of team structure we were working with. So we mapped out the work of the orange deciding team, and they came up with a board structure that suited them, that got them to the end of their part of the overall process. We did a similar thing with the purple deciding team. You'll see that the board structures are a bit different, but fundamentally that's two different teams from two different organizations working with completely different dynamics in their work. Both interpreting the workflows slightly differently, but both charged with the same job of getting from point A to point B in the overall flow in the value stream. So making their own decisions. We also did some visualization work for the survey teams, which made it possible for everybody to get clarity on what was happening in the world of surveying. So that was good. So that covers the first kind of half of that big 4 to 6 year portfolio level workflow. The second thing we did was we looked at the designing and the building part. We said, how about we visualize the work in design and build? So we had a go at that. And that's a little thumbnail of what we had. But you might remember that this is the part of the team topology diagram that represented design and build. And it was really complicated. And it was really full of dependencies. And these enablers are enablers out into those design and build organizations. And those groups of enablers are actually depended on by multiple other teams. And those organizations have their own ways of working and their own tools and trackers and project planning tools and all of that kind of stuff. So what we decided ultimately was we'll let them do it their way because they're comfortable with that and they feel that it's predictable. So we'll let them go with it. So they continue to work their own way, but we still can understand the flow of the work in their part of the value stream because we've mapped out the big high-level portfolio. So we're able to see portfolio level. So to put that into flight levels terms, I don't know if any of you are familiar with flight levels. All right, good, glad to hear that. To put that into flight level terms, so the team, the work execution level is flight level 1. So we'd visualized the work at flight level 1, and we'd started to work in agile interactions down at that level. We also had a flight level 2, the coordination level between the teams, and we started to work on agile interactions at flight level 2. Which leaves an open question mark about what's going on at flight level 3 in the strategic portfolio. So the strategic objective was deliver 108 things for SEPA. And you could break that down a little bit, where some were slightly more urgent than others, right? You'll see this on the Scottish Water website if you care to look at it. Some of them were water quality related and some of them were aesthetic. So obviously the water quality ones are a little bit more important. The aesthetic ones aren't nice to look at, but they're not, a health problem or a water quality problem. But actually it turned out there are other strategic objectives in the portfolio of the organization, right? And we did not get the chance to map those in the same kind of way, but we definitely started to bump into them and the dependencies that they created for us on unexpected parts of the wider organization. So we did definitely start to have to manage that. Right, third thing we did, so I'm going to go back to this diagram. Can anybody tell me what is the bottleneck in this picture? It looks like the blue box. Can anybody see anything else? The bottleneck in this picture was the legal procurement accounting style mechanism for how these organizations communicated with one another. And you know, finally, I get to stand on stage and quote Russell Lakoff. Finally, a system's performance is not the sum of its parts, but the product of its interactions. This is where the product of the interactions really starts to hit home. So because we changed the contractual environment, we were able to bring all these organizations together. They still had their own identities, but we knew that we were all in this together. And because we were all in this together and we could change the team structures and all that kind of stuff, it gave us the opportunity potentially to move everything from, in Westrom's typology model, move everything from bureaucratic, rule-oriented towards generative. So how do you change culture? So if I go back to the stories of Numi and John Shook, and you know they speak very plainly and clearly about if you want to change a culture, first define the actions and behaviors that you desire, and then design the processes that are necessary to create those behaviors. And by doing that, that's how the culture shifts. So how did we do that? So I've already mentioned the new commercial model, right? So the new commercial model created a number of positive outcomes or opportunities, dare I say, in terms of shifting people left, in terms of improving openness and collaboration between all the different people that are involved in the value stream, and also improving the flow of information and communication just generally. It was easier to be transparent with people. Secondly, hands up, I'm slightly biased here, but there was an agile coaching intervention that brought new ways of working that helped with communication and collaboration, obviously, and also put a focus on the flow of value as it went through the value stream. And that was a little bit different from how things had been before. I want to recognize very specifically the contribution of the unit leader in this particular story. Lindsay was present in the Gemba with the teams pretty much every day. She was there to provide support. She was there to answer questions, to communicate intent, clarify intent when necessary, and help make quick decisions when they were needed. And that is an enormous, enormous contribution to the success of this exercise. And you take all of that together, and what you start to get towards is a very dynamic, disciplined environment for risk-taking and experimentation and getting work done. And there's your generative culture straight out of Westrom right there. So another little hero of mine, John Cutler. So if you start looking at John Cutler, and he's got this post about, what is company culture, right? And there's a great big long list, and I'm sure we could all add to it, right? But if these are typical of, what makes culture, it's quite an intangible thing. How did that play out for us? Well, we created dozens of process improvements. We had knowledge sharing between competitors in the supply chain, which felt quite radical, if I'm honest. We had, just picking these things at random, I suppose now, lots of joint retrospectives between the partners, quarterly reviews where everybody was coming together, regular touch points, cross-functional teams with representation from all the partners on them, all that shift left stuff I was talking about earlier. And I wouldn't underestimate the smoke signal of how many Colin the Caterpillar cakes Lindsay purchased for team birthdays and the team building events that happened, because these were events that it didn't matter which of the partners you worked for. You were part of that story. Thank you. You were part of the story. It was part of what was going on. So it was just a little smoke signal of we're in a much more together kind of place. So to summarize, we focused on flow and systems thinking. We focused on feedback loops, and we focused on creating a more positive, a learning culture, a generative culture. Now, some of you might be seeing something familiar in this. And the something familiar I hope you might be seeing is that that's DevOps. And at some sort of level, after FinOps and GreenOps and DevOps and SecOps and all that stuff that's been going on for the past 2 days, I kind of want to say that we've started to think about BuildOps or ConstructOps, but I'm not there yet. But this is definitely the spirit of DevOps. And so we started off there, and we went through quite a lot of sticky notes and Sharpies. And we've got to here, and we're building stuff. So fantastic, but where are we against the hypothesis? So the hypothesis was that we would be looking for the signs that would tell us we're going in the right direction. Predictable cycle times, lower WIP balances, higher throughput, plus better collaboration and continuous improvement behaviors, plus delivery of the work. And bearing in mind that these things do have a big, long cycle time. They are £2 million projects. So it does take 12 to 18 months to actually get the data for this, but the early data shows us that we're getting to site in a third of the time. That means that where previously it was somewhere between 4 and 6 years, we're now 2 or less. A significant improvement, but there's still a lot of work that we could do. These teams were not particularly ready to reduce their work in process. If we could find ways to reduce WIP, I am absolutely certain we would see further speed improvements. As one example. But
Okay, thank you, Cameron. And I think for me, one of the biggest things is that team very much own the change. In fact, most people in the business think they're the ones that have delivered it all, and they have. So our work has really been in enabling that change, and it's phenomenal to see where they have taken this work. So we are now using this. We're looking at other programs of work we've got. So this is one of about 20 programs of work like this. And we're looking at our new regulatory period, which runs from 2027 to 2033, and saying, what can we learn from this to help us with an enterprise model for the future? So there's plenty of potential here, and there's a lot of other things we're doing in the business as well with Agile. But I hope you agree, as our customers, every single one of you, I hope you agree that we're using Agile wisely and using it to help drive to our strategic ambitions. So we don't really have time for questions because we're just coming up to 1 o'clock.
couple of minutes, maybe.
We have 1 minute. Any quick fire questions you've got about the Agile practice, which we've done? Yes.
How well has this been received by your leadership team? What values has it delivered to Scotland?
Yeah, so I think, as Cameron says, there's a long cycle time. The baseline data is horrendous. We got a real challenge with that, and if I could change anything, it would be at the start, would be to get better baseline data if I could in some way. So that's an ongoing discussion. It is really challenging for us to show it. I think some can see it. Yeah, I think as time will tell to show, but we're getting a pull from some people in the business to do this elsewhere.
I'd like to build on that. I think the industry focuses very much on milestone plans. And I think that's often driven by the fact that, as a milestone, we need to be on site on that date and we need to be off site on that date. And because a lot of this is flow based and about creating stability in the flow, sometimes it's not easy to see that that is going to create a benefit in the longer term when we reach the point of a stable delivery, a predictable value stream in terms of the flow of delivery. So, yeah, just to kind of build on that, we're still building the evidence base